Hi there, this is the video assignment for assignment 7, which is plasticity. These are two sample assignments that I'm going to show you just to remind you of what's necessary. So we've got a sketch, your lecture sketch, which is axonometric of your site project, and then paired views, one from a photograph of your plasticine model and one a matching view from your SketchUp model. So about 4 views. And we're matching the color, matching the shadows, matching the point of view. Here's the other sample. We've got the sketch and the 2 images. So I'm just going to run through the SketchUp tools and steps that we used to do it. So when you open SketchUp, the template you want to use is architectural millimeter. Just make sure you're not working in inches. Okay, and once I open it up, I generally get rid of this person because I find them distracting. So just select and delete on your keyboard. And then straight away I change the camera to be parallel projection. This is perspectival. I can tell because the blue line is skewed. So you go to camera and change it to parallel projection. The blue becomes straight. Over here you have the large tool set. If it's not visible, you bring it up by going to View, Toolbars, and you tick on Large Tool Set here. And over here are the palettes, or the trays as they're called in SketchUp. And we're going to use materials, styles, not layers. Get rid of that. We're going to use shadows, or we're going to use scenes. So if any of those ones which we're going to use are not visible on your screen, you are going to go to Window and Default Tray and choose the ones that you want. So those 4. And if you are on a Mac, then when you go to Window, they'll just be listed under Window. So just take them on or off. Okay, so let's start by setting up the style. We want it to have a clean background. So we're going to go to expand your styles palette, go to select, and then choose default styles from this drop-down menu. And I like the 3rd one and the 5th one. So the 3rd one has shading, and the 5th one is just line based. We go to shading for now because it's the easiest to model in, because you can see more clearly what you're doing. Okay, so I'm going to start drawing, and I'm going to start by using the rectangle tool. I click once to begin a rectangle, and wherever I click again will complete the rectangle. I did that one just by eye. If I want to do it more precisely, I click once to start, and I just type in, so 5,000, comma, 5,000. And that's going to come in, those dimensions are going to come in down here in that box. So I've moved it, so it's changed the dimensions. You don't need to click into that box. That just, once you start typing, it automatically goes in there. That's the input box for any of the tools, really. Once you type, it automatically goes into that box. So 5,000, comma, 5,000. It's going to make a 5 by 5 cube. And the first thing I do the minute I model something is to make it into a group. So I want it to be a closed object that isn't going to interact with other things. So I can select it all by triple selecting it, or I could draw a box around it, or I could go Control A. Basically I just want to select everything, which is the lines which bound the bounding lines and also the surface. So select them all, right click and say make group. And now I have a group. And if I double click it, I'm inside the group. I get this dotted line. So I can do stuff to it. And if I want to go outside the group, I just double click outside and the dotted line goes away. So any of the modifications we make to the object itself will be inside the group. So if I double click inside again, and then I'm going to go to the push pull tool, and I'm going to extrude it up, or I can extrude it down. And I can do it by eye, or I can do it again by a set dimension. So I'll enter in a dimension, 5,000, and now I have a 5 by 5 by 5 cube. That's gone off the screen. To see the extents of what I modeled, I click this magnifying glass with the 3 arrows, zoom extents. And that shows the whole box. I'm going to zoom out a bit further because I want to show moving and duplicating. So select the object just once. If I double click it, I go into the group. If I just select it once, then I've just selected it, I'm not inside it. So select the object, go to the move tool, or I can click M on the keyboard. And the way move works is simple. You click once to pick it up, and you click again to put it down. Again, if you want to do it using dimensions, it's going to be more precise. So click once to pick it up, and then I might hover. You can see it locks onto the different axes. Once I hover near an axis, it will lock onto it. So say if I want to move it backwards along the green axis, and then I'll type 5,000, and it goes back by 5. So that's moving, and then duplicating is the same, except that we add control. So I'll start from scratch, select the object, go to M for move, pick it up by clicking once, and then before I click again, I'm going to hit control on the keyboard. So I get a second box, and I'll click again to put it down. So I can either enter a dimension, or I can click. It will snap onto points on another object. So that purple dot is a snap, and the text will come up explaining what the snap is snapping to. Okay, so that is 2 boxes, which are 2 groups. I'm going to show you now what would happen if these were not groups, and it's to explain why we use groups. So if I just model a box like that, it's not a group, it's just, without going into it, I can select each individual object. It's ungrouped, and if I duplicate it, so I'm going to select and duplicate just to get the same configuration as that. And this will explain why we use groups. So this one, I can move around like this. The 2 boxes are completely autonomous. They're not stuck to each other. Whereas if I try to move this box the same way, you can see it is glued to the surfaces of the first box, and the geometry is getting messed up. So this is why we use groups, to avoid objects kind of getting stuck to each other. So make sure the minute you model something that you make it into a group. Get rid of those items. And once you've got your groups, then to modify them, you just double click to go into the group, and this time I'm going to cut a line of this. So if I draw on a surface, it acts almost like a knife, so it cuts that surface into 2, and I can then push pull the surface. It's like a wire cutter. I can go all the way to the end, and once I get that green dot anywhere on the surface that I'm aiming for, once I get the green dot, I know it's going to cut it right off. I'll do the same with a rectangle. So this is to make a hole in an object, for example. You can see that drawing that rectangle on the surface has cut the surface in 2. I go to push pull, go all the way through to the other side, and wait until I get the green dot. So when I orbit, this is the orbit tool up here, the green and red arrow. When I orbit, I can see that that hole is going all the way through, so that worked. Okay, just to explain one thing, which is that when you draw those lines, they have to be inside the group. If I draw a line straight on this box, and then I try to do push pull, you can see it's not letting me, because that line isn't interacting with the surface. You can only interact with the surface if it's in the group. So I double click to go into the group, draw the line, and then I can cut. Okay, so a push pull is always going to be perpendicular to the surface that you select. So if I select that surface and I go to push pull it, you see it's extruding perpendicular to that surface. I can't push pull upwards. If I just want to move the surface upwards vertically, you can just select the 2 bounding lines and move them. Oops, that's right. select those two, and I can move them. Oh, it's not letting me. Sorry, so to move that surface, instead of using the bounding lines, I select the surface and then move that. So I can move that up. You can see at the cursor that I've got a blue dotted line. Once it goes blue, I know that it's locked into the vertical. So I can move that up. So that brings us to scaling, which is this tool here. So I select an object, I go to the scale, and then I get these set of control points. I can do single direction scaling like this by choosing the center point of the surface, this green one. And I can do it by eye, or I can do it by a factor. So if I hit 2, it's going to double that dimension. If I take a corner, it's a uniform proportional scale. So it's not distorting it, it's keeping the proportion of the objects. And again, I can enter a factor to do it accurately. So if I enter 5, type 5, it'll go 5 times the size. If this ever happens where everything goes kind of blue and half transparent, just hit zoom extent and it will fix that. So let's make it smaller again. Click once to start, and I would be clicking a second time to finish, but instead I'll enter a number. So let's try 0.1 to make it 1/10 of the size. We go zoom extents again to bring me back here. And then the third type of scaling is kind of this irregular scaling. If I select one of the center lines, it's the control point on the center line, it is kind of not very easy to control, not proportional scaling, so I don't generally use that. Okay, so once you have a surface, an object like this, you can always modify it by going to moving surfaces, for example. If I want to make this window bigger, I can just edit it. So it's kind of endlessly malleable. And the tools we're using for this are pretty basic. So we've done scaling, there's cutting and push-pull. And we'll look at rotate as well. So I select an object and I go to the rotate tool. It brings up this protractor, which will either be blue for a vertical, red or green, depending on which axis you want to rotate it around. So I want to rotate around the blue, so I want it to rotate it in plan basically. Click once to start the rotation, then I'm going to click once to do the start angle, and I can do it visually like this, or I can enter an angle. So I'll enter 90, rotated by 90 degrees. Then I'll move that down here. Okay, sometimes it can be useful to use these standard views up here, these house icons. So it gives you a roof plan, elevations, and axo. If you don't have those, it's called the standard view template. You can right click the space up here at the top of your screen. Just right click the white space and tick on views. That's what that one is called. Okay, I'm just going to put these together so that they will cast shadows on each other, and I'm just going to duplicate so that I have a bit more going on. Kind of scale this. Okay, so say that is the object. Remember, it's a very basic model. It's not detailed. It's a concept model like the Plasticity model. So that might be enough for now for me to go with. So I'm ready to start changing the visual aspect of it. First, let's look at scenes. So scenes over here in the default tray. If you don't have it, again, you're going to go Window, Default Tray, Scenes, or on a Mac, just Window, and Scenes will be directly under Window. So I can make a scene just as it is by clicking this plus sign. I'm going to call that one Modeling Scene, because it's the one I'm going to use for modeling, because it has the lines, it has the axes, it's easy to see what's going on. One more thing I want to show you is guides because they are useful for doing set out. It's a bit like the construction lines in Vectorworks. So I can go to this tape measure tool. I just click once to start, and then I can enter a dimension. Say I want a set out grid of 1 meter length, for example, and then I can use that to set out a model, whatever your grid might be. Say I want these to both be on that grid. I can snap to the intersection. See, it's going to say intersection there. Snap to the intersection between the grid and the line. Okay, so let's double click my scene again, and it takes me back here. So that's our modeling scene. I can see my axis, I can see my guides, I can see the lines. It's all easy to see and easy for modeling. But it's not the output we want. Remember, the output we want is more like this. So it's a color, there's no lines on the edges, and we have shadows on. And there's no axes, and there's no guides. Let's look at turning all that stuff off. First, let's add the color under materials. Go to select. In this drop down, you'll choose colors and choose a color that matches your plasticine. I'm going to go for this pink. So the cursor then turns into a paint bucket, and you just hit each group once. So as long as your object is all just grouped objects, you just have to click a group and it'll make everything inside that group will become that color. So that is the color, and in styles now we're going to look at getting rid of the edges. So we were in select default styles, and we were in the third one. The fifth one has no color. So let's start with the third one as our starting point. We want to turn off the edges, and to do that we need to edit the style. So I go to the second tab in the styles palette or tray, and here I can fine tune the style. I'm going to turn off the edges and turn off the profiles. And up in view is where I turn off the axis and the guides. So if I go over here to view, take off axis and take off guides. And this is getting to look more like it, just missing the shadows. But first let's save this as a scene. So add a new scene. This thing, save as a new style, you can say yes, create scene. I'll call this colored XO. Colored XO1. So I can jump between the two scenes. The point of view in the two scenes is the same. It's just the visual representation of it which is different. Okay, so let's go to our shadows. You expand the shadows palette, and this little icon, which is the white cube with a shadow, doesn't really look like a button, but that's the button for turning on the shadows. So when I turn that on and off, the shadows will turn on and off, and I can control the time of day here, and I can control the time of year here. We're not going to touch the light and dark. Make sure use sun for shading is on. It probably is going to be on by default. And then here on the display, I can choose where the shadows will land. On faces, you're definitely going to want, because you want the shadows to land on the faces of the object. On ground, you probably want as well. But just in case that looks weird, you might want to turn it off. I'm going to leave it on in my... Now the edges have come back on. It's probably because I turned the shadows on. Go back in here, turn off the edges and the profiles. Turn off the axes and the guides. And let's update the scene. So just click once the scene and update it, which is this little recycle button. It's going to ask me these things, just say yes, yes, update scene. So now I've got those two scenes, the modeling scene and the shadow scene. I'm going to rotate it, choose a different point of view. Here, I'm going to change my shadows as well. I'm going to just choose a shadow setting which it makes you understand the three-dimensionality of the object. Next week we'll look more closely at geolocating the model so that the shadows are correct for the location. But for today we were trying to match the shadows in the photograph of the plasticine model that you took. So we're taking some poetic license. Now if there's no light, obviously the object is going to be black. So I'm going to go for that. And I'll make that a new scene. So just zoom in a bit. It's bigger on the screen. And hit add scene, which I'll call colored XO2. And now if I double click between the scenes, it animates the transition between the two. So that's two different scenes. You make 4 of those, and we're going to export them and put them side by side with the photographs, and you can lay that out in either InDesign or Google Slides. So the last step for SketchUp is to export the 2D graphic. I'm going to go to File, Export 2D graphic, and I'm going to go into Options. Now it might be smaller than this on yours. If you want to override the pixel size, you just unclick, use view size, and enter a pixel dimension that you want. I'm going to go for 3000, but if your computer can't handle that, go for a smaller number. Make sure transparent background is turned on. I'm going to save it into a place that makes sense. And it's coming up as a PNG, which is good. We want it to be a PNG. I'll hit export. It'll take a second to process that. I'm going to open Photoshop in the meantime.